Helen Gurley Brown began her career as a secretary and eventually became one of the highest paid copywriters in the country. She tried her hand at writing fiction and wrote Sex and the Single Girl, which has sold millions of copies internationally. In 1965, she became editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine, and the result is publishing history. Since that time, Cosmo has become one of the 5 largest-selling magazines sold on American newsstands.
Well, my husband did take our little Loving Hands at Home format for a new magazine around town and saw various publishers, and they didn't want to start a magazine, or at least not our magazine. It takes tons of money. You know, it takes 100 years before Sports Illustrated or any magazine, any new magazine, Self magazine, a long time before you actually succeed. Nobody wanted to do it, and we found this opening at Hearst where they would let us work with a magazine they already had. Why didn't we hold out and say, no, we want to start our own magazine? Because Mother really didn't know enough about running a magazine to even suppose that she could succeed, if you don't mind my talking in the third person, for even 5 minutes. It was very unlikely that I would be able to do it, having never done it before. So I wasn't so high and mighty. I felt very lucky that somebody would even give me a chance. David was going to do it with me long about that time. He went back to work for Darryl Zanuck at 20th Century Fox, and he was very caught up in that world. Now, of course, you realize that you could have made a ton of money if you'd started your own magazine, but at that time, it wasn't so feasible. I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about magazine editing. All I had was a basic brain and a lot of drive, a husband at home who could sort of help. I will say I was terribly, terribly lucky because my husband and I had this idea whose time had come, really. It predated the feminist movement, and the idea was there should be a magazine for women who loved men and loved children but didn't want to live through anybody else. They were going to do something on their own. You didn't want to get your identity from your football-playing brother or your account executive husband or your rock star boyfriend. You wanted to be known for what you did. Well, nobody, for heaven's sake, had ever thought of that before, so it was a wonderful format for a magazine, and it was just the right time. And the challenge was simply to get it done. And because nobody else was doing it at the time, and I seemed to have some skill at editing, we didn't know I had it. I never had done it before. It just turned out to be what I ought to be doing in life. So the original challenge was just to make it work. It was easier then, my darling, than it is now, because there weren't any others. I had 6 all to myself. You couldn't mention it in another woman's magazine. And there I was with this precious, viable, fabulous commodity just for Cosmo. So now it's tougher. It's tougher, but we're doing just fine.
What advice do you have for someone starting a business?
There are so many books written on the subject which are really excellent. We run some of them in Cosmo, how to be an entrepreneur, how to start your own business. So I would just have to glean other people's advice because I've never started my own business and I'm not the world's living authority. But I believe you have to be capitalized. You've got to have enough capital. Don't go in too skimpy. B, you have to find it very difficult to work for other people. You must have that need to be your own boss. C, you have to have a lot of guts and courage, and you have to not take rejection too seriously. I believe you have to start out with 2 or 3 clients. You don't just put the shingle out on the door. You start out with 1 or 2 people whom you think will help pay the bills. Just sound advice like that. In terms of success generally, how do you get to be in a position to start your own business? How do you get to be in a position to be asked your opinion on such a thing, which is happening to me right now? I've written all that in a book, Having It All. It just simply says, you work your tail off. You don't pretend that you don't have to work hard. You get up every day and you do what is there to be done.
Has it been an advantage or disadvantage being a woman in business?
I would turn that around and say it's wonderful to be a successful woman. It seems to have a special joy to it because nobody expected much of women when I was beginning to get on with it. I wouldn't say being a woman has hurt and being a woman hasn't helped. I think a man or a woman uses whatever charm and personality that he or she can muster. I see people all the time, men, using whatever charisma they have, because you've got to get other people to do it with you and for you. If you're the boss, you've got to talk people into things. So you use whatever means are available. But I don't think women have any more charm than men. Some of both sexes don't have none. So too bad. That's part of their arsenal that's missing. I don't think you have to be masculine. I flirt if I have anybody to flirt with, but it doesn't get out of hand. You are a woman, he is a man. Romance at the office certainly is a very commonplace thing, and that goes on between men and women. So obviously a woman has been rather charming or feminine to attract somebody. Whatever. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't help, but it sure is wonderful to be a successful woman. I would say 3 cheers and hallelujah for that.